Good evening, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris. Little update on the refugee program. A number of viewers have sent me a link to an article that appeared in Reuters on the 24th of April, 2025. And they said that, wow, they're processing people, and people have already been processed for the refugee program for Afrikaners suffering from unjust racial discrimination in South Africa. Now, I read through the article, and it's mostly a rehash of information that's already out there, information I've provided, information interviewees provided, information other media outlets have put out there. So I'm not really sure what the intent or purpose of this was. It's coming on the heels of events that have already occurred. But it says U.S. focuses on persecution claims as white South Africans seek resettlement. Well, that's interesting. It took 4 people to author this: Tim Cox, Nellie Payton, Ted Hessen, and Christina Cook. So they focus on a number of things here, talking about white South Africans have been interviewed by officials at the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria. Indeed, I've told you that since the first interviews took place, a number of people contacted me and told me about their interviews, and we shared what you can expect potentially in these interviews, since the United States government has been very mum on what's happening. As I've told you, my assessment was this was an initial assessment to get a feel for what's going on. They're making the claim that 30 people have already been processed as refugees. I'm not aware of a single South African who has been processed and has left the country or is in the process of leaving the country as a refugee under this program, which is yet to be publicly disclosed by the Department of State and the Department of Homeland Security. So it is a little bit odd. They say more than 30 applicants have already been approved, according to a person familiar with the matter. Okay, well, that's their source. I don't know who their source is or who told them that. Once again, I suspect that this is a leak by journalists that's not entirely accurate. I'll stand on correction if I'm wrong, but it seems odd for a program that has not announced the specifications, the ramifications, the qualifications, and the conditions of the program, that they haven't even announced you can apply for a program. There's no application process for it right now. All you can really do right now is send an email to the American Embassy, which we provided in the past. So I'm not really sure where they're getting this from and who's telling this. I suspect what has happened is that they've probably reviewed some cases. As I said, they've done at least 100 interviews based on what we've seen anecdotally. And in those interviews, they probably identified people that clearly are being discriminated against in the opinion of those adjudicating the cases. And maybe 30 of those are they're looking at potentially approving to go to the United States. Perhaps that's what's going on. Both the embassy and the administration have declined to comment on this, so they must have a source inside the State Department that is feeding them information. And I think they're misinterpreting the information. They also interviewed, of course, from the Amerikaners, Katja Bieden, who appeared on Ronaldo's program recently. She's asked to come on my program. I'll have her on as soon as possible. But they've talked to a few people, some who wish to remain anonymous, and one of them, the comment that came out here says, "I imagine some applications will be denied, as we do in all cases," an official said, speaking on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss internal details about the process. But I think there is administrative pressure to approve these applications. So once again, someone's talking out of school unauthorized. But that's how media folks get sources. That's how I became aware of a purported event that I reported on yesterday from people who speak out of school. Now, a gentleman named Mark, who's in his 50s and worked in the food industry for decades abroad, said he told U.S. officials that black empowerment laws had left him unemployable. The laws are intended by the government to correct past exclusion of black South Africans from the economy under apartheid. Now, that's Reuters trying to explain it, but what they're not explaining is that it's racist and it is morally bankrupt and wrong. That's the situation here, folks. And they try to go to great efforts to dismiss the horrific assaults, murders of South Africans on farms. They say out of 26,000 murders in South Africa, just 44 were linked to farming communities, according to police statistics. Well, police statistics are in dispute. We know that in the past, the government of South Africa has hidden police statistics to simply not reported crime statistics for a couple of years because they were so horrendous, and the data cannot be trusted. 44 is not even close to the mark. But regardless, that's 44 people who died, and Reuters just thinks those 44 people don't matter. Anyway, again, this is not about farms, it's not about farming, and that's where this all goes sideways. These leftists try to paint this as a farming issue, and they try to paint it as rich white people. And they come down to this, they talk about this. They want to, in this thing, they have in paragraph, white victimhood. The South African government said Trump's order failed to recognize the country's painful history of colonialism and apartheid. No, it has nothing to do with your colonial history. It has to do with the abuse of your citizens now. The fact that black South Africans were abused during apartheid gives no one the right to abuse white South Africans today, or colored or Indian or black South Africans. That's a morally bankrupt position. Anyone that actually defends that is a bizarro. Because someone was abused in the past gives you the right to abuse other people. That's especially perverse when you consider that over half the population of South Africa was born after 1994. under majority rule. So you think it's okay to discriminate somebody over an immutable fact of skin color? You're no better than the racists who ran this country before. And these journalists are no better than the racists who ran this country before, telling this narrative. It's bogus. Unbelievable. The average white household in South Africa owns 20 times the wealth of the average black household, according to a review of political economy in Academic Journal. Official data shows that unemployment rates are far higher among black citizens. They are. By the way, they capitalize black. That's grammatically incorrect. Black is an adjective. Citizens is the noun. You're modifying the noun. Lowercase. Stop the nonsense. Citizens does not modify black. Black modifies citizens. I'm getting so sick of this woke nonsense. 3/4 of South Africa's private land is still white owned. That's actually factually a lie. It's an absolute lie. I've covered this. I've broken down the statistics. It's utter bullshit. Utter bullshit. 72% of commercial farmland in 2017, when the last land audit was done, was owned, according to the government, by white South Africans. But that was 36 million hectares out of 93 million hectares of private land. Only 12%, 13% of South Africa's soil was arable. These are lying, race-hustling leftists misleading you. And for those of you who are reading this Reuters report, I would question whether they're factually correct in their assessment that 30 people have been approved to go to America, and their assessment of what's going on here by the mere fact that they clearly have no idea what the fuck is going on in South Africa. They're factually incorrect on virtually everything they talk about here, and they're morally reprehensible in dismissing the deaths of 44 people. The idea of white victimhood suggests that bad things happening to white people are infinitely worse than the same things happening to anybody else, said Nikki Falkhoff, head of the Center for Diversity Studies at University of Witwatersrand. Well, once again, that's bullshit. White victimhood is some bullshit you leftists came up with. That's nonsense. You're full of it. Your garbage is meant to diminish the suffering of people. Who denies that black South Africans are suffering in this country? Who denies that? Who denies that colored South Africans are suffering, or Indians? Nobody denies that. But you think it's okay to murder, rape, pillage, and ban from employment and steal contracts and steal companies from white South Africans because of the crimes or misdeeds of people who came in the past? You're morally bankrupt. It's not racial genocide. That's a narrative of the political left. But white folks are targeting for their skin color because a lot of people falsely assume that white people are wealthy. They think that every person who's white is wealthy, and therefore they become prime targets of crime. Some, there's vengeful things that happen. Some of the horrific attacks on farms, but also in centers, the rapes, the tortures that take place. This is a disgusting article. And for any of you that believe the article, well, that's your prerogative. I choose not to believe it. They are this incorrect in their analysis about what's happening in South Africa. I choose not to believe their analysis of what's actually going on with the refugee program. But that's my position. You can take your own position. They're factually incorrect. And I'll go back to the land. 3/4 of the land in private hands is owned by white South Africans. That's total bullshit. The only data on land that's reliable is the 2017 land audit. And that audit itself says 72% of farmland is owned by whites. And I'm not certain of the methodology used for that. I've been told, I don't know that this is factual, I've been told that they use surnames. Well, that's bullshit, since most colored people, many colored people have Afrikaans surnames, either French or Dutch or German. So I really don't know, but I'll accept that 72% of commercial farmland was in the hands, or farmland was in the hands of white South Africans in 2017. It's not the case today, folks. We have hundreds of disused farms that have been acquired by the government or abandoned by South Africans, or their farmers have been murdered across the country. This is utter nonsense. And these people get away with this bullshit. It's horrific. It's sickening. And it's unacceptable. What say you, South Africa? What say you, world? Well, that's my take on it. Cheers.